Welcome to Wine and Wisdom for the beginning of a new year. This really deserves a l'chaim. So if you don't have any wine yet, I highly encourage you to go get some. This is now the completion of a complete year of Torah studies where we've been meeting every single Wednesday to study the Torah portion of the week and try to glean some life wisdom from it. And I don't know how many of you have been here since the beginning, but Yasher Koach, a big mazel tov to you for completing the whole thing this past Simchat Torah. And now we're going to start all over again. We're going to start with Parashat Bereshith, the opening Torah portion of the entire year. So l'chaim, l'chaim, if you are drinking wine, Baruch atah Adonai, Eloheinu melech haolam, borei peri hagafen.
Amen.
L'chaim, l'chaim. May this Torah study really have a real and lasting impact on our lives, enhancing our relationships and our approach to struggle and everything that we do with our lives, helping us to overcome any challenges in our lives. L'chaim, l'chaim. And just in time, welcome Yosef Ilan. Good to see you.
Thank you.
Okay. So Parashat Bereshith, the opening Torah portion. We always like to start with a little summary of the entire parsha. Parashat Bereshith is an easy one to do. It's also probably a difficult one to do if you actually want to do it justice. But since we only give a summary, it should be easy. In short, Parashat Bereshith covers the 6 days of creation. On day one, God created dark and light. My son Menachem told me that today in school they were painting with marbles on plates. I said, "What colors were you painting?" He said, "Black and yellow." I said, "Why black and yellow?" He said, "Because the dark and the light." He explained, as if like this is the most obvious thing in the world, the dark and the light. What do you mean? Anyways, and then so on, all 6 days of creation until on the 6th day, human being is created, man and woman, and then Hashem rests on the 7th day. And Adam and Chava, Adam and Eve, are placed in the Garden of Eden, as it says, "La'avdo l'shamra," to work it and to guard it and nurture the garden. They're given only one command, which is don't eat from the tree of knowledge, good and evil. But the serpent persuades Eve, who persuades Adam, and the blame game begins, and the first sin is done. From then on, the human species are banished from the Garden of Eden, and the world begins in the way that we know it today, or at least much closer to the way we know it today. Chava, Eve, the first woman, gives birth to 2 children, 2 boys, Cain and Hevel, Cain and Abel. Cain quarrels with Abel to do with an offering that they brought, and one was accepted and one wasn't accepted. Anyways, he murders him, and because of that, he becomes a rootless wanderer. A 3rd son, Shais, or Seth, is born to Adam, the first man, and at the end of the parsha, we have a long family tree where Shais's, or Seth's, great, 8 times great grandson is a man named Noah, who is the only righteous man in a corrupt world. And so ends the first Torah portion of the first book of the 5 books of Moses, Parashat Bereshith. Okay. And the title of today's lesson is Purpose Before Process, how the creation of light creates a roadmap for personal success. You ever going through life, and whether it's in a relationship or whether it's in your job and your career, whatever it is, and every once in a while we have these reflective moments, and you say to yourself, "How did I end up here?" You know what I mean? This is not how things started. I wasn't planning to get here, and somehow here I am.
Is that what you're asking yourself now?
Yeah, well, I always talk to myself during this class.
Oh, okay.
It's not really supposed to be eavesdropping. Anyways, but no, you know what I mean. You set out with a plan,
sure,
and then somehow it doesn't really go exactly the way you had planned it to go. And there are millions of self-help books out there which intend to solve specifically this issue. Right? There's a song. I forget who it's from. There's a song that it's a song about a fellow who gets lost. He's lost in life and he's looking for the right way. And he's in the middle of driving. And one day he's driving on the road, and he hears the GPS say, it's an old song, obviously, because it has this old nuance that the old GPSs used to have. You know what they used to say, recalculating?
Yeah.
You know what I'm talking about?
Yeah, I remember.
So he's driving along the way, and he hears the GPS go recalculate, and that's when he realizes, oh, I got to recalculate. I got to start my whole life over. I got to refocus and rezone in on what's important in life. And yeah, sometimes there's all sorts of self-help books out there to try to help you figure out how to recalculate your life. And in my opinion, the best self-help book is right here in front of us. It's a book called the Torah. And it does have a lot of life lessons. It has a lot of tidbits and guidance on how to lead your life and how to recalculate if you go off track. And that's going to kind of be the goal today. To talk about goal setting our sights at a particular goal, staying focused. And if we do lose track, how to recalculate and make sure that we're recalibrated going along the path that we would like to. So today, I'd like to talk about the creation of the world, and from that's where we'll take our conversation from. So, the creation of the world, as many of you may know, was not by God waving some magic wand. It wasn't by any sort of. There's no tips and tricks I can give you as to how God created the world, but the Torah does tell us one thing, which is that God created the world by speech. And in the very opening verses of the Torah, Bereishit, in the beginning God created the heaven and the earth. And then, Brett, you want to read for us in text 1, which is literally the third verse in the Parsha, third verse in the Torah.
All right, here we go.
Go for it.
And God said, "Let there be light," and there was light.
Boom. He says, "Let there be light," and there was light. Boom. And that was as simple as it was for God to create things. He would say things and they would come into creation. Now, as so happens, this is the third verse. So let me just give you a little background. The first verse is, in the beginning, God created the heaven and the earth. The second verse is that before God created the world, in the beginning, there was nothing. There was just emptiness and wilderness. Not wilderness, wrong word.
Chaos,
right? And then the third verse, and God starts creating it. That God says, "Let there be light." Now, this is a strange way to start. Why start with light? In fact, light doesn't end up getting used till way later in creation. In other words, there aren't any, not just human beings, but any creations, not even plants, that can appreciate the sun, or never mind the fact that the sun itself wasn't created yet. So why on the first day do you start off by creating light? Now, lest you say this is something, it's insignificant, I don't know, so God decided to start off by creating light. What's the big deal, Rabbi? Why make a big deal out of this? The truth is, the Torah makes a very big deal out of first. Everything that is first in the Torah has an extremely powerful significance put to it. Many of you that I see here on the Zoom attended my son's Pidyon Aben 3 years ago, right? The Pidyon Aben is when we redeem the firstborn. Why is that? That's because even when a child is born, the firstborn, if they meet the criteria, are consecrated for God until we purchase them back from God. The Kohen becomes the agent of God in this instance, right?
Right.
Think about the fact that the first Aliyah, anytime we read the Torah, the first Aliyah, big significance. Who's going to get the first Aliyah? It has to go to the Kohen. We have to honor the Kohen with the first Aliyah. Very big deal. Just as past Simchat Torah. You know which Aliyah the Rebbe would always get? Anybody want to guess? The first Aliyah of not of the Torah reading on Simchat Torah, but the first Aliyah of the entire Torah, which in Hebrew is known as Chatan Bereishit, the one who begins the Torah again.
He wasn't a Kohen.
Well, this wasn't. On Simchat Torah, we read first the end of Ezot HaBracha. In other words, the last portion of the Torah. There's like 5 Aliyahs there. Right. And then we do Chatan Torah, which means the last Aliyah of the Torah, the one who concludes the Torah. And then we do the one who opens the Torah, who begins the Torah. So it's not the first Aliyah. The first Aliyah is designated for a Kohen, but the first Aliyah of the entire Torah, which is Aliyah number 6, I think, on Simchat Torah, is Chatan Bereshit. Right? There's a lot of significance placed to this. Judaism places a lot of significance on what first means and who gets first and what first is, etc. We're commanded to give the first of our crops to the Kohen. We're commanded to bring a sacrifice with the first of our animals. Pidyon Peter Chamor B'seh. Different mitzvahs, all different sorts of things, all to do with first. The first of our fruits, right? Arla, anybody remember this? For the first 3 years, we're not allowed to eat our fruits until the 4th year, we're allowed to Jerusalem, etc. There's a lot of emphasis placed on first. So you would think that the first thing that was created in this world would be something masterful, right? Maybe even a human being. Human being is saved for last.
Mm-hmm.
So what is the significance of the fact that light is created? So let's talk about light. Let's speed along throughout the Torah all the way to the end. Devarim, when Moshe Rabbeinu, Moses is giving his blessings to the Jewish people, the 12 tribes, etc. So he gives his blessing to the tribe of Yosef, and he actually blesses them, and he says, you are already blessed because the physical plot of land that you have in Eretz Yisrael has a lot of light. Brett, you want to continue for us? Text 2a.
All right. And with the sweetness, produce of the sun, and with the sweetness of moon's yield.
Okay. And then Rashi explains, what does it mean with the sweetness of the produce of the sun? Arnold, you want to read?
And where? And with the sweetness of the produce of the sun, for Joseph's land was exposed to the sun, which sweetened its fruit.
So Rashi explains that there was that it was a very big deal that Joseph got a plot of land that was very much exposed to the sun because it brought the sweet, all these sweet fruits out. So therefore, it was considered a blessed land. Light is a very, very different thing than everything else that was created. Let's think about light for a second, right? Light is out of all the things that were created throughout the 6 days of creation, light is probably the only thing that can't be touched or grasped in any way. You have to perceive it on something else. In other words, you see the light either reflected in something else, or you see the actual light on something else,
or you feel it.
Or you feel it. I guess if we talk about the warmth from the sun, right? And light specifically, out of all the things that were created throughout the 6 days of creation, light is probably the only one that you can see clearly is meant to serve other things. It's almost as if it doesn't have its own purpose. Light is meant to see. It's meant to feel, to perceive other things, to serve other things. And yet, it's created first. To make this even more puzzling, we'll ask Baron to read for us this Gemara, this quote from the Talmud, in text 3. This is from Tractate Chagiga.
With the light that the Holy One, blessed be He, created on the first day, a person would be able to peer from one end of the world to the other. God concealed it. From whom did He conceal it? That's a good question. For the righteous people in the future.
Very interesting. So here we got a little more insight into this light, and it seems to be starting off to explain a little bit what's going on over here. God created light at the beginning, and it was some sort of weird light. It was like an energy that would help a person see from one end of the world to the other end of the world. This is obviously not regular light that we know of, right? But then it gets even more cryptic. He concealed it. He hid it. So he created it on the first day, but then he hid it. This is certainly not talking about the light that we know of, the light that's shining behind Kamen's head right now. Not talking about that kind of light, right? It's obviously talking about something much more ruchniistic, something much more spiritual in nature. And then he hides it, and he hides it for tzaddikim at some future time, for righteous people at some future time. So what was the point of creating it now in order to conceal it, in order to use it later? The whole thing is starting to get a little weird, right? So, yeah, we gained a little bit more understanding because we recognized that the light that was created on the first day might not have been the most physical light in the world, but we're still at a little bit of a loss as to what exactly this light is all about and why it would be created on the first day and why it would be hidden, etc. Okay, so that is the big question that we're going to deal with today. If I may, I'd like to take a moment now to pivot. I'd like to talk to you a little bit about focus, okay? And you'll see almost immediately how the two conversations will connect. And in order to just kind of open the conversation, allow me to tell you a story. There was a man by the name of Rabbi Mendel Futterfass. Rabbi Mendel Futterfass, some of you may have heard me talk about him before. I love his stories. He passed away in 1995. At the time, he was living in England, I believe, or in Eretz Yisrael, the land of Israel. He lived in both. I forget where he was when he passed away. But he had a whole different life, like a preceding life that he left behind in the former Soviet Union. He was instrumental in helping many Hasidim immigrate, or I should say illegally immigrate out of the former Soviet Union and come to the US or to Israel or wherever it was they wanted to go. This is at the time that the Iron Curtain was still standing, in its full force. And He was also very instrumental in keeping Judaism alive in the former Soviet Union. Some of you may have heard that the previous Chabad Rebbe was very, active in this regard. So Rabbi Mendel Futterfass was one of his main players there. And his reward for all this is that he spent, I think, 14 years, I think was the total, in a Soviet gulag in Siberia. All right. You've heard stories like this before.
Yes.
What makes Rabbi Mendel different? What makes Rabbi Mendel Futterfass different is that he was a little bit obsessed with this statement by the Baal Shem Tov, which is that we have to take a lesson from everything that we see. Rabbi Mendel Futterfass went through some pretty extreme situations, hopefully more extreme and more crazy than anything that anybody on this Zoom has ever been through. And his perspective on them and his take on them was recognizable when he came out and he spent time in London and and then he would teach Chassidus and he would lead Farbrengens for the Chassidim there and for the yeshiva students there. So he would share story after story after story that happened to him in these Soviet gulags, and he would give his take on. Apologize, I thought that was an urgent text. On why he happened to witness this particular incident and what lesson he could take from it, and what lesson all the people at the Farbrengen would be able to take. So one day, Rabbi Mendel Futterfass is sitting at a Farbrengen, I think it was in England at the time, in London, and he's telling them that he's telling them about, he's going back years to the gulags. And he says one day there was a little bit of excitement in the gulag. What happened? One of the inmates realized, I don't know if there was development, whatever it was, he realized that it was about 6 weeks' time and he was going to be let free. And as part of this, he was talking about returning to his former life and getting to lead his life again as a free man, etc. So as part of this, it started a conversation between all the inmates as to what it was that they had done for a career before they were arrested. And each person is saying, I was a plumber, I was a this, I was a contractor, whatever it is. Fine, great. So this fellow was about to be let out. He starts to tell them what he did. He said, "There's this concept called the circus. Wasn't so popular then, right? Trains were a recent development, and together with trains came this idea that we can plug a whole circus onto a train and have it travel from town to town. And not everybody was familiar with the circus. There was some that had heard of it. And he says, and in the circus, he was an acrobatic performer. Specifically, his skill was tightrope walking. Anybody ever hear this story before?
No.
That's a fascinating story. So the other inmates start to say, oh, we don't believe you. You made the whole thing up. There's no way that you can walk from one pole to another pole, I don't know what it was, 50 feet, 100 feet, whatever it is, balancing on a tight rope. Forget about it. You can't do it. So he says, listen, in 6 weeks' time, I'm leaving. When I'm set free, on that day, we'll make a little celebration. And we'll ask the guards if we could do this, whatever. We'll tie a rope. We don't need poles. We'll just tie it from tree to tree, and I will perform for the whole crowd. Sure enough, the day comes. The guards were excited. This is more action, right? So they string a rope, and he starts to do it. He starts to go from side to side, and he's walking along, balancing, whatever. And my Mendel is telling this story. He says, and it was interesting. He says he didn't make it all the way across. He fell, And as he fell, he says, it's interesting, you were able to see that he was a skilled performer by the way he fell, he knew how to fall. Fall and roll into his fall or whatever it was. He says, and then he got to the other side. Everybody started to clap because they thought he was done. And all of a sudden, it was like a collective gasp in the crowd. It was like, right? Why? Because he had gotten all the way to the end. And within a split second, he had flipped around and he had started walking back. Nobody expected that the act was going to continue. And in this manner, he walked all the way back. And this time, he didn't fall at all. And he came down to rousing applause. Everybody's excited. Says Reb Mendel, while everybody else was busy applauding him and getting excited, etc. He says, I walked over to him. I had to know something. He says, while you were walking the tightrope, I noticed that you were very, very focused. He says, and obviously, look, I get it. A lot of it is practice. But obviously, there's some sort of skill to it. And I want to know what the skill is for you to be able to do this. So this Russian circus performer looks at Mendel. He says to him, I see you're a wise man. He says, I'll tell you. He says, the key is that as soon as you get up to the top, you got to look all the way at the other side of the rope and find some sort of little, little something to fix your eyes on. He says, and while you're walking along the tightrope, of course, your body is doing the mechanics of it. He says, but you can never look down. If you look down, you're going to fall. You'll freak yourself out, and then you'll fall. He says you have to lock your eyes on the goal all the way at the end, and as you go. So now he turns to a Mendel and he says, "So you're a smart rabbi." He says, "So tell me, so what's the hardest part of my act?" So the Mendel already picked up. He said, when you reach the other side. He said, correct. Yeah. He says, when you reach the other side, and in one fraction of a second, I got to figure out how to let go of the goal, do a 180, and find a new, zone-in spot on the other side. That is the hardest part of the entire act. Not when I get to the middle and it's the highest. Not when it starts to get windy and it starts to shake. No, when I lose sight of that goal, and I have to find a new goal on the other side, that's the hardest part. Remember what verbring for people that it's very important throughout life to have a set goal in mind and to know exactly what's going on and what's right, what's going to be, and to know what I don't know what's going to be. We can't know what's going to be, but to know where you're headed, and that if you're focused on the goal, then you don't get so caught up in the little ups and downs along the way, right? Because there's always ups and downs along the way. Then the Mendel continued that the hardest moments in life are the transitions, right? You get a new job, you're getting married, you're getting divorced and then remarried, whatever it is, right? Any one of these steps along the way, these transitional moments are the hardest. Why? Because you got to realign, you got to recalibrate. Can I add having a second child to that list? I don't know if it's as big of a recalibration, but there's definitely a little bit of a recalibration there. The goals are the same, but the way you do it is different. Anyways, so I tell you guys this story, and I know it took a long time, because I want to stress how important, the importance that Judaism puts on goal setting. And we're going to start our conversation with a medrash from this week's Torah portion. Kalman, if you can read it for us, we'd be greatly indebted. About specifically what it means to have a goal before you do a project. Go for it.
In the way of the world, an earthly king who builds a castle does not do so from his own knowledge, but rather from the knowledge of an architect. The architect does not build it from his own knowledge, but rather he has scrolls and books to know how to make rooms and doorways. So too, God gazed into the Torah and created the world. Blueprints.
We've all heard of them.
Yeah.
Right? You got to have a blueprint if you're going to create a palace or any sort of structure for that matter. Right? Thank you, Kalman, for reading for us. And this is also found in the Licha Dodi, the beautiful prayer that we say every Shabbat. We again reference this idea of having a blueprint, having a goal, having a set laid out plan before you actually accomplish a task. Kalman, you want to finish off for us?
Come, let us welcome the Shabbat.
This is from the Siddur. This is from the Licha Dodi. Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah. Let us welcome the Shabbat, for it is the source of blessing. From the beginning, from aforetime, it was chosen. Last in creation, first in thought.
Sof Masa Machshava Techila. Of course, on Shabbat, when we're singing about Shabbat, right? We're saying Lecha Dodi Likrat Kala. Let us go towards the Shabbos, the Sabbath Queen. Let's greet the Sabbath Queen, etc. What are one of the things that we praise the Sabbath Queen with? That it came into being last. Shabbos was a day of rest. And that was the seventh and last thing that happened in the order of creation. But that is precisely its praise, because the ultimate goal is obviously the beginning was the original plan. Right? If you see somebody, you ever see one of those quick painters when they paint on the stage, they paint the whole painting in front of you? Anybody ever see one of those acts? Mm-hmm. Believe it or not, we had one scheduled for Chabad of Pasadena for Purim for this year. And then as the RSVP started coming in for the Purim feast, we realized it was going to be a very small crowd, because this was like 2 days before they shut the country down.
Yeah.
So we canceled it. We're like, there's not going to be a massive crowd. This is going to be a small event. Yeah. Anyways, normally we have 150 people, we had a very small crowd. Anyways, so we actually have a schedule. If you ever see them do it, like in the beginning, you're not even sure, what do these lines mean? What are these things, whatever, right? And then at the end, the whole thing becomes clear. But if you think about it, really what's going on all the way at the end is what the artist had in mind all the beginning. The artist has a full picture in mind. And all the steps along the way are kind of the artist improvising and trying to figure it out. How do I get this to work? But the beginning of it all, right, only becomes apparent all the way at the end. Similarly, when Hashem created the world with an end goal in mind. Right? So there are there are these pinkasois or blusterois. There are these difterois, these notebooks and these blueprints and all sorts of things, which are the Torah. Hashem looks inside the Torah and then creates the world. And then the final product that you see at the end, which means the world with the Torah in it, that was what God had in mind at the beginning. This whole idea of having a plan and then enacting that plan, then going through the steps, first setting the goal and keeping your mind on the goal as you're going through the steps, is actually it's a model that God is setting out for us as to how we should go about our lives. Think about it. There are many things in Jewish tradition that you know of that follow this model. For instance, every day, right? We have a 24-hour day. We start off that, whatever, on a 16-hour day that we're up, whatever it is, right? That we're awake. Depends. Phil, are you still up with us?
Yes, I am.
You just making sure. All right, good. So, yeah, but however many hours it is that we spend waking hours, during that time, we want to stay focused. So what do we do as Jews? We wake up, the first thing we do? Anybody?
Pray.
Pray.
Well,
During that time of prayer is a time to stay focused, to zone in on what it is exactly that God has intended for the world, right?
Mm-hmm.
Sorry, somebody was saying something?
I said Modeh.
Right? Similarly, Shabbat. Shabbat plays a similar role for the week. At the end of Shabbat, we make Havdalah. We once gave a full class on Havdalah. It was an in-person class. I guess it was a good 8 months ago. But at the end of Havdalah, we ask that these blessings from Shabbat should carry in throughout the week, right? Shabbos is where we set the goals, and then the rest of the week follows. On Rosh Chodesh, you know that Erev Rosh Chodesh, the day before Rosh Chodesh of each month, is called a mini Yom Kippur, the beginning of each Jewish month. Why? You're supposed to take stock, figure out how was the past month, how is the future month going to be, right? Setting goals, staying focused. And really, the entire year is that way. The entire month of Elul is called Chodesh HaCheshbon, the month of calculation. Why? Because we calculate what the coming year is going to be like. The Talmud in Baba Batra calls this by an interesting name. Baron, you want to read for us?
Yeah. Come and let us calculate the account of the world, the financial loss incurred by the fulfillment of a mitzvah in contrast to its reward, and the reward for committing a transgression, the pleasure and gain received in contrast to the loss it entails.
Thank you. So, I mean, look, this is obviously a statement about, playing the end game and not getting carried away by a small temptation you have in front of you. Play the big picture. Recognize that even though you might write, just like dietitians tell you, you're going to eat this chocolate right now, but in the long run, right, it's not good for you, etc. So right now you get a little bit of pleasure, but in the long run, it's not worth it. So this is telling you the same thing about a mitzvah, right? Even though you might think that right now I can just pass this mitzvah, but in the long run, you want to be connected to God, etc. And you don't want to, so therefore you should weigh the reward that you get for doing a mitzvah versus the loss that you get by doing the opposite. Anyways, but look at the term for this used in the Talmud. Accounting of the world. Cheshbono shalolam. In fact, throughout Jewish scripture, not scripture, but throughout Jewish literature, you'll find this called not just cheshbon shalolam, but cheshbon nefesh. It means kind of a soul accounting, an accounting of your soul, right? We're all familiar with the concept because we do it with our finances, right? Almost everybody does it with their finances. Once a month, you take a look at the budget, you'd be like, this wasn't such a good month. We went down a little bit. Next month, we got to cut back, right? Certainly, if you own a company, you do this. But even most people in their personal finances, at the end of the year, the same time, usually when we're doing our taxes, we figure it out at the end of the fiscal year. How much did we gain? How much did we lose? Was it a good year? Was it a bad year? Right? We all do these sorts of calculations. But somehow, when it comes to our soul, it's a little harder. Right? So we have to take our cues from Hashem. When Hashem created the world, Hashem did the same thing. Hashem first laid out the plan for which, and this is obviously going to tie back into light being the first thing that was created, which we're going to talk about in just a moment. He laid out the plan for what the purpose of the world was, And then afterwards, he started to go through the steps to actually make that, create a reality out of that plan. The image on the screen, which is a lion, is because I'm supposed to be telling you an analogy now of the Dubner Magid. Anybody ever hear of the Dubner Magid?
No.
No? It's a good story. I didn't think it was as powerful, but I'll share it with you. Maybe some of you will take a more powerful lesson from it than I did. They tell the story. So the Dubner Magid, let me just give you a little background on the Magid of Dubna, from the city of Dubna, lived about 100 years ago, I think, or 150 years ago, maybe. Anyways, he was famous for his mishalim, for his analogies. He would tell these little fables and stories, you know. He was better than Aesop, if you can believe it. He had all these little fables and stories that he would tell, completely made up. But they have like these powerful lessons of, like, you know, obviously supposed to drive home something very, very powerful. So a lot of them have to do with animals. He tells the story of the lion, the king of the animals. It comes to all the animals, and he says, listen, it's time for us to figure out something is really, really terrible. There's this terrible decree, and we have to figure out what we've been doing wrong. There's somebody among us, or some of us have been sinning, that there's this terrible decree, whatever the decree was. I don't know what it was. Anyways, so he says, listen, I'm going to start. I'm going to do the first confession. He says, the other day I killed a man. He says, I was patrolling the boundaries of my territory, and there was a man, and he had two legs, and even though I knew that he's the man, he's a master over the human race, is master over the animal kingdom, I killed him. And I think this might be the cause of our great calamity. You know, maybe this crime is it. And all the animals look at the lion and they say, what? Who can blame you? You were distressed, you were distracted, you were thinking about your kingdom. So that's how you killed him. You were trying to protect the kingdom. Surely you are forgiven for your transgression. Next up is the wolf. The wolf says, I have something I need to confess. He says, I was, you know, I'm a predator, and I was going through the forest, and I saw a sheep, and like a lamb, and a mother. What's a sheep and a lamb, I guess, right? Is that the term?
A ewe.
Anyways, what was that? A ewe. A ewe.
E-W-E.
A ewe. I didn't see you in the forest, Phil. Anyways, so I had to. He fed that right to me. Anyways, so he says, I was so hungry, I was able to eat a full lamb, so I ate the lamb, and then I killed the mother too for good measure. He says, maybe that's why. They say, you're right, you sinned, but you were hungry, so therefore, you're probably forgiven. And so it went one after another. Every predator would say his sin, and they would figure out some sort of excuse as to why what he did was okay. Last to speak was the sheep. The sheep says, I too committed a crime. He says, the other day I was very hungry, and for some reason my master, my farmer, had neglected to put out to take me out to the pasture. So I ate a little bit of the straw that my master puts in his shoes so that his feet shouldn't rub against the hard leather. All the animals jumped on the sheep, and they said, you are the cause of the great calamity. And they started to rip the sheep to shreds. Criminal, sinner, we have to kill you. Right? What's the takeaway from this fable? I think there's a lot of them. But the one that the Dubner Magid chose to share with us is that very often, when it comes to a cheshbon hanefesh, when it comes to something like an accounting of the soul, it's very easy to see the faults in others. For ourselves, we make all sorts of excuses, right? And for the little poor, downtrodden, etc., that's where we take advantage of them. We say, we judge other people. We see other people doing terrible things, and we judge them for it without giving them the benefit of the doubt. But when it comes to ourselves, we don't give ourselves the benefit of the doubt. Either way, this idea of an accounting of the soul is very, very important. And that's why we find it right at the beginning of creation. So in order to figure out why God would create light first and how this shows that God is starting with the goal in mind and then going through the particulars, so we got to understand what the goal and the purpose of the creation of the world is, right? So, look, there's a lot of discussion about this, as you can imagine, among Jewish philosophers, but we're going to go with the Hasidic approach, primarily discussed by the Alter Rebbe in Tanya, which we'll quote now from chapter 36, but also discussed at length by the Rebbe Rashab a few generations later in a Maimonides discourse called Yom Tov Shalosh Hashanah, Tafresh Samach Vav, in the year, whatever Tafresh Samach Vav is. And I mean, I guess it's 1906, I think. Yeah, I think that lines up well. 1906. Anyways, so he shares with us that the whole purpose of the world is that God has kind of hidden his light in the world, and our purpose is to reveal that light in the world. Let's see how this works. Text 7. Marilyn, will you read for us, please?
The ultimate purpose of creation is this lowest world. For such was his blessed will that he shall have satisfaction when the ungodly perception is subdued and the darkness is turned to light, so that the divine light shall shine forth in the place of darkness and ungodliness throughout this world with more intensity than its effulgence in the higher worlds.
Okay, thank you. So there is a light that God embedded within the world, and it is our job to reveal that light. And God created it in such a way that only we can reveal it. Great, I love it. Without getting into all the details of the challenges that God puts along the way and why there are challenges to revealing that light, why it's not easy to do a mitzvah. Without getting into all that, that is the purpose of creation. What was God's purpose of creating the world? In every situation we're in, reflection of the purpose is key, right? So in other words, at every single moment, when we are, let's say we're faced with a choice to do something that we know is an amazing mitzvah, or to do something which is the opposite, right? So just like the Talmud said, he's making an accounting of the world. So an accounting of the soul and an accounting of the world, it turns out, are very interconnected. The more you think, the Rambam, Maimonides in Hilchot Teshuvah, in the laws of Teshuvah, encourages us to think this way. The more you think that the world hangs in the balance based on your action, right? The more you'll appreciate that it's not just, either I do the right thing or I do the wrong thing. Either I put the shopping cart back or I don't. What difference does that make on the cosmos? Mm-hmm. More you meditate, says the Rambam. His idea of meditation is that the world should be like a scale, where there's literally equal amount of good deeds and bad deeds. And that if you do this, if you pass this one situation, you can literally sway the entire scale for the good. Says the Rambam, that will help you to place proper weight on your decisions. All right? Now we can understand why God would start off by creating the world first with light, right? Phil, go for it.
This explains why light was created on the first day before any other creation. It is because light is a purpose with which God prefaced the creation of the worlds with his first utterance, "Let there be light." It means that everything that is about to be created, the world in all its details and constituent creations, all of it will be transformed into light.
Okay. So throughout creation, light is going to play a very, very important role. So therefore God says, let me create it first, like that we have the goal in mind, and then throughout, we'll keep it in mind. Okay, great. This sounds amazing, right? Except that in the Talmud, there was a discussion about the fact that light was hidden. He creates it on the first day, but then he hides it. I don't get it. If it's so important to have the goal of creation in mind, why would you hide it? Right? Why hide it away? On the first day, literally. So to answer this question, let's go back to the whole idea we had, the whole concept we were talking about vision and purpose, right? We all know how important it is to have a goal beforehand. If we didn't, by now you should know, right? We told enough stories and wrote enough text to prove how important it is to have a goal. But let me ask you, and obviously you should have that goal in mind as you go along. But imagine if, like, you have a blueprint, and you're planning to build a big building. The blueprint is the goal, and then you're trying to figure out how to hire the cheapest workers, and you can't get the blueprint out of your mind. You're looking into the blueprint, trying to figure out how to get the cheapest workers. It's not going to work, right? You got to get involved in the details. You can't stay stuck in the vision. You got to start rolling up your sleeves and getting to work. We all know that sometimes we get distracted by the vision. We're so busy, focused on the goal, that we forget to put one step in front of the other. Imagine if the fellow who's trying to do the tightrope walking, right? He's so focused on it that he just goes paralyzed. But all he could see is that little dot on the tree across from him, right? Instead of him actually putting one foot in front of the other. So in general, to break down the way that you use a goal, the balance that we do of having a goal, but at the same time actually performing the steps necessary to achieve that goal, to break it down a little further, there are really two more elements to keep in mind. Number one, you got to take the time to form that clear plan before you start to act. But number two, you got to keep that plan in your head throughout the entire process, while at the same time making sure not to get distracted. Right? These two things. Okay, so just to clarify, in number one, you're totally engrossed in making a plan, setting a goal. In number two, you're much more focused on the details you're working on so that the job is going to be performed properly. However, your plan is in the back of your mind. These two stages, when you focus more on the plan or when the plan is there but kind of makif, kind of in the background, hovering in the background, these two stages are actually referenced in the creation story when light is mentioned. So we've already been discussing number one, step one. The fact that light is created on the first day is God setting a clear plan. The purpose of this world is to reveal light in this world. But what's step two? Step two is all the references that we find to light throughout the rest of the recounting of creation. Let's see. Text 9. Stephanie, you want to read for us?
No, I'm driving.
Oh, I'm sorry. Okay, Ron, you with us?
Yep.
Go for it. Text 9. This is a few verses later in verse number 31.
And God saw all that he had made, and behold, it was very good.
Okay, so this is from way later in creation. In general, this is a frequent refrain that we have throughout creation, right? In this case, it's Vayi'er. They don't translate the full verse, but Vayi'er Vayivoker Yom Hashishim. That this one is from the 6th day of creation. That it was an evening and a morning, and then it was a 6th day. But we have this almost at the end of every single day. It says God saw what he made, and it was good. God saw what he made, it was good. And then on the 6th day, it said Vayar Elokim et kol asher asa. God saw everything that he did, and it was good. Right? Interestingly, the Talmud suggests that this turn of phrase is a reference to the presence of light. Ron, keep reading for us, please.
At the time when Moses was born, the entire house was filled with light, as it is written here. And when she saw him, that he was a goodly child, and it is written there, and God saw the light, that it was good.
So simply mentioning that someone saw that he was good is an allusion to light, says the Talmud. Did everybody follow what we just did right there? When Moses was born, it says Vatera Oso, and she saw him, the mother. In other words, in this case, Moses' mother saw him. Ki tovu, she saw that he was good. The Talmud says that from this very phrase, she saw that he was good. You could tell that there must have been an emanation of light. That's how he could tell that it was good. So the passage of God creating light on the first day is actually re-emphasized as you go along. Each time that God finishes another step of creation, there's an abundance of light. And Vayar Elokim Kito, and God sees that it is good. So weiter. So still, why hide the light? I don't get it. It plays such an important role. And it's there throughout. You got to keep it in mind. Why would you hide it? Okay, let's see what the Rebbe has to say about this. Baron, you want to read for us? Text 11.
The purpose of any action, say for example, that a person can be expressed in two ways. A, as revealed in the mind and intent of the actor as a primary and overreaching sense of purpose before the act itself and in its early stages. B, during the act itself, as the person perceives the overall purpose of every specific thing he does, so they are all in accord with their purpose and their goal. Throughout the duration of the act, the purpose is not being conveyed as openly or to the same extent as it was before the act. Similarly, the supernal purpose of creation, signified by the light that was created on the first day, has two levels. A, the level of the light itself, which is mentioned explicitly in the Torah, and God saw the light that it was good. That is the light itself that was manifest on the first day and the first utterance before every other creation in the world as their ultimate purpose. B, a ray and reflection of that light was conveyed in each successive utterance in creation. It is this godly light that enables these creations to align with and achieve their purpose, to transform creation into light. Of this light and purpose it was said, and God saw that it was good, meaning that it was light, but merely an allusion to it, that is hidden and not as fully revealed as it was on the first day.
So, thank you, Baron. So hiding the light was as crucial of a step as creating the light. On the one hand, God needed to create the light first in order to set very clearly that this is the goal of the creation of the world, light, to bring light into the world. But similarly, and perhaps equally as important, it was important for God to hide the light immediately. Why? Set it aside. It should be there. It's hinted to. It's never mentioned clearly throughout the rest of creation. And yet every single day, it would bubble again to the surface. Vayar Elokim ki tov. God saw that it was good. There was this light, but it's not the primary thing in our minds. It's not distracting me from the step by step. Yet at the same time, it's there and it's overarching and it's hidden, but it's there, it's overarching, and I know that that's my master goal and that's my master plan. In fact, another verse or phrase, whatever that's used with regards to the coming of Mashiach, when this whole plan will come to fruition, is what? That the world will be filled with the light of God, filled with the knowledge of Hashem. Like water covers the sea, it says, right? In other words, the light which was created at the beginning is the light which will be fully revealed at the end. The light which was created at the beginning was the potential in this world for us to reveal light in this world, the godliness that there is in this world. And now will come to its fruition when Mashiach comes, and that actually becomes the reality of the world. But in between, Hashem didn't get distracted. And every step of the way, light was the goal, light was the purpose. This spiritual light, obviously, not the light bulb that we see in the image on the screen. But at the same time, he wasn't focused on that. He was focused on the details. So if we want to learn in our lives how to create not a world, but at least a world of change in our lives, how to actually stay focused on our goals in life, to be proper Jews, to keep Torah, to keep mitzvahs, etc., we have to set ourselves goals. Very, very important to set yourself goals. But equally as important, not to let those goals obsess you. And to focus on the details of the step at hand. Trying to remember, I didn't prepare this before, and let's see if with a quick Google search I could find it. There was a man. No, hold on. Yeah. There was a man by the name of Reverend Robert Williams Shields. Anybody ever hear of him? He lived from May 17, 1918. I'm reading to you from the Wikipedia article because I remember hearing this story years ago and thinking it's fascinating. He lived from May 17, 1918 till October 15, 2007. He was an American minister and high school English teacher. He's best known for having written a diary of 37.5 million words, which chronicled every 5 minutes of his life from 1972 until a stroke disabled him in 1997. So he wrote a diary, it filled 91 boxes, and it was longer than any diary in the past. 21 million words, 17 million words, 30 times longer than Samuel Pepys, which is 1.25 million words. In other words, he would go through 5 minutes of his life and then recap. So what happened in the last 5 minutes? Let me write it down. You understand? I ate lunch and I ate this and that. Lunch would have to have 5 entries, you understand? Because lunch takes 25 minutes. You know what I mean? And I spoke to this person about this. Every 5 minutes had a diary entry. The problem with this now, writing a diary is an amazing tool. We all know this. If to write down our thoughts, right? Some people, whenever they go through a calamity in life, not a calamity, like a rough patch in life, the easiest way for them to go through is to put it down on pen and paper. I'm like that, right? That's a healthy thing. To have a diary in general is a healthy thing. Maybe write once a day, once a month, whatever it is. Once every, not even a set time, right? To go through life and to recognize, to make calculations is a good thing. But to let those calculations every minute, am I meeting the goal that I set at the beginning? Am I meeting the goal that I set at the beginning? Right? Imagine if at every single minute, the board of directors of a Fortune 500 company would come to the CEO and say, listen, oops, I don't know what I just did there.
That would be a little obsessive.
Right? Every minute you become to and say, the goal is for us to be making money, for us to be getting to, I don't know, $500,000 a year. How is the move that you're doing now, where you're walking to go get your coffee, how is that getting us to $500,000? On the one hand, it sounds like an amazing thing to keep in mind. While I'm walking to go get my coffee, is that meeting the goal or is it not meeting the goal? Right? Sounds like an amazing thing to do, because then you'll always stay super focused, but you'll never get anything done, right? Because you'll never be able to take any steps. You'll be so busy making calculations. So Judaism is about fulfilling the deeds properly with focus, and beneath the surface, knowing the purpose. In other words, you give tzedakah. While you're giving tzedakah, do you have to be thinking that this is causing the light of Hashem to be revealed in the world and exactly all the different philosophical ideas from all the books that we mentioned earlier? No. You have to give tzedakah, and that's it. You do tzedakah because there's a person in front of you who needs money. But while you're doing them, you have to recognize that there's an overarching thing. We can't ignore the goal. It's the most important thing, the goal. You have to start off by thinking about the goal. Maybe take a moment of meditation every morning, every Rosh Chodesh, every Elul for the whole year, right? And in this way, we'll actually remain focused to the purpose of Hashem, and will bring about that time when the world will be filled with the light of Hashem. With the time of Mashiach, may be speedily in our days. Amen. L'chaim, l'chaim.
Amen.
Amen.